Hello everybody, and this will be the introduction to the lecture for this week on heresy and the emergence of ancient Catholicism. Last week we moved rather quickly through the 2nd and 3rd centuries, kind of taking a sampling, looking at the Church's experience with persecution and with martyrdom, and how those things impacted self-understanding and worship, and how it led to the apologetic turn in church history, where Christian leaders and preachers first began to turn their attention outward, not so much inward but outward, beginning to address the wider Roman culture as both a defensive move and in some ways, for lack of a better term, an offensive move in sort of taking the message to others to share it and to invite people to consider it. This week we back up a little bit again, and we're going to start to slow down some more to pick up on some other loose threads that also come from that same time period, the 2nd, 3rd century. In particular, I want us to consider the phenomenon of what we today call heresy, and what the Church has come to call heresy in its history. We're looking at some of the earliest rival and alternative interpretations of the Scriptures and of the traditions of the Church, and these are perspectives, ideas that were ultimately not deemed to be consistent with the teaching of the apostles as it was handed on to their successors. And it's important to study these heresies, and to study the people who propagated them, just in and of themselves for the sake of historical knowledge, but also in order to better understand what would become Christian orthodoxy and how that took place. It's even more important to see how the encounter with heretical ideas pushed the Church to create mechanisms and structures which would allow it to better safeguard the integrity of its message and of its own unity. And so we talk a bit about heresy today and its effects on the emergence of ancient Catholicism. We know the general connotation of the word heresy as something that's contrary to orthodoxy. But an earlier and a more basic meaning of the Greek word, hiereo, is actually to choose, or particularly to choose for yourself, to choose out of the consensus of the community, to make your own opinion about one particular thing the thing. And that's a really enlightening observation, I think, about the meaning of that word. If we pay attention to many of the heresies in the early church, you can see that that's actually generally the origin of the difficulty, of the division that results. Someone wants to choose for themselves the meaning of the gospel of Christ or the doctrines of the Church, rather than receiving what is being handed on to them and reflecting on it and interpreting it in a community and with the mind of the whole Church as a guide in doing that. We're going to engage with various different heresies along the way this week and over the next several weeks, really for the remainder of the course. Different heretical ideas pop up, but today we'll look at a few of the earliest examples and how the Church responded to these challenges. I want to just give a bit of an aside here and say one other thing about the word heresy before we get into our material this week, and that's that heresy is different than simply a doctrinal error or a diversity of opinion. It can be tempting today, I think, whenever we encounter someone who holds a different opinion about the Scriptures or about how we understand a doctrine that we think is really important, that you view it this way, and someone sees it another way, we want to immediately denounce them with the label of heretic. But to be a heretic is to be more than simply at odds with somebody, or even to be wrong about something. Heresy is not so much a sin against truth, but rather a sin against humility and against charity, and it's stubbornly persisting in an error and encouraging others to follow in that. despite having received the witness and the correction of a community. So I think we need to practice a careful reading of those that the church has deemed to be in error, past and present, and use the term heretic sparingly. I once had a professor who said we should think of heretic as the H word of the church, in the sense of some of the words that we use to express very strong language, curse type words. We should be careful with the H word in the church and only use it when it in fact really applies. There certainly were heretics in the full sense of the word within the history of Christianity, and there's a time for using that word, and in our time as well, but I think we need to tread lightly when claiming the right to label others in this way. So as we begin, as is our custom in this course, an opening quote. And this is from the preface to the Church Father Irenaeus, from his writing called Against Heresies. And he says this: "These people falsify the oracles of God, and they prove themselves evil interpreters of the good word of revelation. They also overthrow the faith of many by drawing them away, under the pretense of a superior knowledge, from him who rounded and adorned the universe, as if they had something more excellent and sublime to reveal than that God, who created the heaven and earth and all things that are therein. By means of specious and plausible words they cunningly allure the simple-minded to inquire into their system."